Hey guys, tonight we're heading back to ancient Greece. Not for war, not for philosophy, and definitely not for democracy. No, tonight we're floating gently down into a moment you've probably never thought about. The time the sun god Apollo accidentally created the first music festival. That's right. Not Coachella, not Woodstock, but a celestial jam session full of toga-clad immortals, weird instruments, and the occasional out-of-tune war cry. You find yourself perched on the edge of Mount Olympus. The clouds below look like melting marshmallows. The air smells faintly of nectar, ozone, and something vaguely floral, maybe divine deodorant. Up here, the gods have everything they could possibly want. Eternal youth, constant parties, and zero laundry. But as you shuffle along a sun-drenched marble corridor, one figure seems bored. It's Apollo, golden hair perfectly combed, tunic slightly wrinkled, you suspect he slept in it, and a lyre resting lazily across his knee. His expression is the immortal equivalent of someone halfway through a 10-hour layover. He's flipping through some celestial sheet music and sighing deeply. "Another hymn to myself," he mutters. Thrilling. You'd think being the god of music, light, healing, poetry, and basically every extracurricular would keep him busy. But immortality, it turns out, has long gaps of absolutely nothing to do. So Apollo's sitting there, letting the sun run on autopilot while he plucks half-heartedly at his lyre. The lyre, by the way, was a gift from his younger brother Hermes. And if you're wondering how a literal toddler god crafted a working musical instrument from a tortoise shell and sheep guts, well, let's just say ancient Greek parenting had a very hands-off approach. Anyway, the plucking continues. Gently. Tunelessly. You might even call it ambient. Apollo scratches his chin. Something's missing. Not just from the music, but from everything. He wants connection. He wants creativity. He wants someone to say, "That riff slaps, my guy." But Olympus isn't exactly a hot spot for constructive feedback. So he plays louder. From somewhere above, a breeze rustles the laurel trees. Birds scatter. A minor earthquake rattles the fruit bowls in Hera's kitchen. Apollo doesn't notice. He's in a kind of trance now, looping one shimmering sequence of notes that vibrates through the mountaintop like a gentle ripple in a wine-dark sea. Still, he stops, frowns. "It's not enough," he says aloud. "I need an audience. Maybe even a band?" And just like that, the idea sparks, soft as starlight, but bright enough to outshine the sun. A gathering, a performance, a thing, something to cut through the celestial monotony. Of course, if you're imagining Woodstock, but with togas and lightning bolts, well, you're only about 40% wrong. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Back to Apollo. He stands, stretches, and immediately declares his living quarters a creative prison. You follow as he strolls past Hermes, who's mid-prank, dangling an olive over Ares's head using invisible string. Ares doesn't notice. He's been trying to compose a battle chant for 3 centuries. Apollo doesn't stop. He's on a mission now. Down the marble steps, through the clouds, past a bored-looking centaur who offers him a handful of grapes and asks, "You heard the one about Orpheus's kazoo?" No response. Apollo's heading for Earth. As you trail behind, your feet float more than walk, the sky thickening like sleep settling over your eyes. The golden god hums softly to himself, each note weaving reality just a little differently. The clouds part. Below, forests spread like ink across parchment. Valleys roll open, sleepy and sun-warmed. And in the distance, something gleams. That's Delphi, but we're not going there yet. First, Apollo needs inspiration. And snacks, but mostly inspiration. He lands lightly on a hillside just outside Thessaly, where shepherds doze and goats meander without purpose. It's quiet, peaceful, the kind of place where time naps under trees and the breeze forgets to move. Apollo sits. The lyre rests on his lap again. His fingers twitch. Then pause. "What if," he murmurs, "what if I invited the others to join in?" This is not normal god behavior. Typically, the immortals like their divine activities separate. Ares with his bloodshed, Athena with her strategy games, Poseidon with his passive-aggressive wave splashes. But Apollo? He's craving a collaboration. Something messy. Something alive. You glance upward. The sun hangs at a slight angle, waiting for Apollo's attention. He waves at it vaguely. "Just stay there a minute," he mumbles. Down in the valley, the shepherds start to hum. They don't know why. They just feel like something new is in the air, like the sound of a festival being born. And here's your mainstream historical fact for the night. The real ancient Greeks did, in fact, hold musical competitions. The Pythian Games, for example, were second only to the Olympics in importance, and they featured singing, lyre playing, and something called aulos duels, which are essentially musical stare-downs using double pipes. As for Apollo, he doesn't know any of that yet. He's just a god with a dream and a tune stuck in his head. Some say this moment, Apollo's moment of lyre-driven boredom, is where all divine music began. Others argue it was Hermes' doing, or even Pan's chaotic flute sessions in the woods. Historians still argue whether the first music festival was myth, ritual, or a retroactive label slapped on some deeply chaotic goat dances. But you're here now, in the middle of it. The breeze hums, the hills sway, and somewhere nearby, a few curious nymphs begin to gather, drawn not by the sound, but by the strange fact that a god is playing for no one but himself. And that's always how the best festivals start. You trail behind Apollo as he makes his way back up Olympus, his golden sandals lightly thudding against the cloud paths. He's whistling now, if you can call it whistling when it sounds like sunlight getting filtered through harp strings. Something's shifted. The sulky energy is gone, replaced with a kind of twitchy optimism, the kind you see in someone who just bought way too many paintbrushes without having a single canvas. As he re-enters the Olympian halls, he's hit by a wall of bickering. Hera and Demeter are mid-dispute over whether ambrosia should be served warm or chilled. Ares is pacing in circles, muttering potential rhymes for warrior. Poseidon sulks in a corner fountain, grumbling about someone misplacing his best trident. In short, it's a high-drama brunch without the mimosas. Apollo just stands there for a second, lyre slung over his back like a golden backpack, watching the chaos unfold. Then he starts strumming, softly at first, just a few idle notes. The effect is immediate. Zeus sneezes. Lightning briefly arcs across the ceiling. Hera narrows her eyes. Athena looks up from her scroll. Even Dionysus pauses mid-sip, blinking. The music isn't loud, but it fills the space, each note curling like incense through the marble halls. Practicing again? Hermes pipes up from somewhere under a couch cushion. Let me guess. Another sad ballad about your own reflection? Apollo doesn't even flinch. No, he says coolly. I'm thinking of doing something collaborative. You can practically hear the record scratch. Athena lowers her scroll. You mean with us? Apollo shrugs. Why not? Everyone has something to offer. Ares scoffs. I offer destruction. Yes, but rhythmically, Apollo replies. Think percussion. This earns a thoughtful grunt. Ares hadn't considered that war cries might double as backup vocals. Dionysus stumbles forward, wine goblet in one hand, grapes in the other. Does this mean we're throwing a party? He slurs, perking up like a child hearing the word cake. Apollo raises an eyebrow. A festival, maybe. Oh, Dionysus coos. That sounds just fancy enough to make people wear sandals with straps. Now, you're not sure if the Olympians even know what a music festival is, but in this moment, it doesn't matter. The idea is catching like divine wildfire. Athena is already mentally organizing the seating chart. Hermes is licking his fingers and drawing up promotional flyers on stolen scrolls. He adds slogans like, the soundtrack to immortality, and now with 40% more nymphs. Only Hades isn't here. But let's be honest, he rarely shows up unless someone dies or forgets to invite him to something, which is frequent. At this point, Apollo's pace quickens. He starts listing possible acts. The Muses, obviously. Maybe Artemis, if she can be lured away from her moonlight hunting expeditions. He mumbles something about Pan, though his tone implies slight hesitation. Pan's last public performance included 2 goats fainting and a tree catching fire. He strums his lyre again, and this time the sound changes. There's structure now. A beat. A mood. The sort of melody that makes you feel like you're walking through a vineyard at sunset, even if you're just standing next to a statue of Hera's pet peacock. Fun historical fact time. In real ancient Greece, music was more than entertainment. It was deeply woven into religious festivals, athletic games, and even military training. The nomoi, or structured compositions played on lyres and other instruments, were believed to influence the soul, calm anger, and even regulate bodily health. Plato had strong opinions about which scales were appropriate for noble citizens. Spoiler, no minor keys. As Apollo plays, you start to notice something else. Mood swings. Not just his. The gods. Hera stops arguing and starts humming. Hermes begins tap dancing on the edge of the fountain. Even Poseidon taps the side of his trident against a marble pillar in rhythm, which causes 3 minor tremors and a confused sea serpent to surface near Crete. Apollo isn't just entertaining them. He's shifting their moods, smoothing the sharp edges of divinity into something softer. Music is turning Olympus into, well, not a utopia exactly, but a slightly less passive-aggressive penthouse. And that's when it hits him. If he can get them all to perform together, something amazing could happen. Something unifying. Naturally, because this is Olympus, the moment of quiet inspiration is shattered by Aphrodite yelling from down the hall, "If there's a rehearsal, I demand at least 2 mirrors and a silk cushion for my tambourine." And just like that, the mood is off again. Apollo sighs, deeply. Still, he doesn't give up. He retreats to his private, sun-soaked alcove, a space that smells like oranges, cedarwood, and faint cosmic vanity. He takes out a clean scroll, begins sketching ideas for arrangements. Who plays what? Where to hold it? Whether mortals should be allowed to attend? Probably not. Someone always asks awkward questions. You float nearby, reading over his shoulder. It's a beautiful mess. Artemis on flute, Dionysus on drums, though the drums are just upside-down wine barrels. Hermes on lyre number 2, Muses as vocal backup, Ares as rhythm section? Questionable. You'll circle back. The best part? Apollo doesn't even realize it, but he's already launched the first band rehearsal. He's so focused on the plan, he hasn't noticed that the gods outside are already testing instruments, humming tunes, and arguing about stage names. Historians still argue whether this moment, this chaotic divine convergence, counts as the origin of music festivals, or if it's more accurately described as the universe's most dysfunctional open mic night. But to you, floating silently through the golden light, it feels like the start of something weird and wonderful. And you get the sense that the best, or possibly strangest, is yet to come. When you wake, if it's even possible to sleep on Olympus, you find yourself perched on the edge of a marble colonnade, legs dangling above a sea of clouds. Below, the gods are gathered. Not for war, not for a feast, but something far more dangerous. Their first group rehearsal. Apollo stands center stage, or more accurately, on a raised stone platform draped with laurel garlands and moodily glowing sun rays. His lyre is slung over his shoulder like a seasoned frontman. He's smiling, but you can tell it's the forced smile of someone trying to organize a band of immortal egos. Dionysus is already tipsy and using his drumsticks to beat rhythmically on 2 amphorae. One breaks. He applauds himself. Artemis stands far off to the side, arms crossed, flute resting against one shoulder. "If anyone tries harmonizing with me," she says flatly, "I'm leaving." Hermes is late, obviously, but when he arrives, he skates in on winged sandals and tosses Apollo a scroll titled Festival Name Ideas, Vol. 7. The top suggestion? Sunstock, a divine gathering of vibes and vengeance. Apollo pockets it with a diplomatic nod. "Let's begin with something simple," he says. They don't. Immediately, Ares launches into a thunderous clanging rhythm using a shield and what might be a femur. Athena begins reciting tactical battle chants in Dorian mode, which clashes spectacularly with Aphrodite's sensual tambourine rhythms. Meanwhile, Pan, who was not technically invited but showed up anyway, starts playing an unsettling solo on his reed flute that causes 2 cypress trees to burst into bloom. Apollo claps once, twice, then louder. "Everyone! Tempo! Key! Let's try to stick to one." You can't help but laugh, silently. This is less a rehearsal and more a mythological jam session inside a very luxurious blender. Here's your historical tidbit of the section. Real-life ancient Greek music theory was surprisingly sophisticated. They divided scales into modes, each thought to influence character and mood. The Dorian mode, for example, was manly and grave, while the Phrygian mode inspired emotion and ecstasy, kind of like trying to pair an epic film score with interpretive dance. And that's exactly what's happening here. Except instead of dance, Dionysus is trying to balance a grape cluster on his nose while tapping rhythms with his knees. Apollo pinches the bridge of his nose. "We need structure," he murmurs. A muse, Calliope maybe, wanders up holding a notepad. "Maybe a theme?" she offers. "Like the cycles of mortality through music, or harvest rites with harmony, or," she blinks, "songs to distract the Titans from escaping Tartarus?" Everyone ignores her, which seems unfair since that last one had real potential. As chaos continues, Apollo retreats to his favorite perch, the edge of the sky. You follow. He sits beside you, squinting toward the mortal world. "They don't understand," he says softly. "Music isn't about showing off. It's about resonance, harmony, balance." Below, you see shepherds once again, now leaning against trees as the wind carries soft musical threads from the clouds. The music isn't beautiful yet, but it's curious, like the sound of a culture taking its first steps into melody. And then a new idea strikes him. Not just a concert. Not just Olympus. He turns to you. "What if we took it down there?" You raise an eyebrow. You, the one made of cloud-hitching dreams and eternal jet lag, aren't technically allowed to make facial expressions. But you try anyway. "You mean Earth?" Apollo nods. "We'll start the festival on Earth, with mortals, a shared experience, songs that bridge the divine and the human." Pause. Then, "Also, I hear the olives are better down there." Thus begins a new phase in Apollo's creative madness. Over the next few days, you watch him ping around Olympus, collecting instruments, bribing muses with nectar, arguing about venue lighting with Hestia, who is extremely territorial about hearth-related spaces, and trying to convince Zeus that letting mortals hear divine music won't cause mass existential crises. Zeus finally agrees, but only after Hermes pitches it as a pilot program for mortal behavior management. Meanwhile, the gods are, slowly but surely, falling into rhythm. Ares agrees to be the drummer, as long as he can use a spear to keep time. Dionysus composes a chaotic but oddly catchy chant called Wine-Spilled Sunrise. Artemis writes an instrumental piece that sounds like a nighttime hunt under a full moon, and terrifies the birds every time it plays. Even Hades, yes, that Hades, sends a raven with a scroll reading, "Will attend if refreshments include soul cakes. No sunlight, no hugs." And here's your fringe tidbit. Some scholars believe that certain Greek mystery cults used music not only for celebration, but to induce trance states, gateways to divine connection or altered consciousness. So Apollo's earthbound concert might not be so far from how ancient initiates once danced themselves into oblivion. As Olympus hums with pre-festival nerves, Apollo drafts his final plan. A twilight gathering somewhere serene, with a natural amphitheater. Perhaps a cliffside in Delphi. Perhaps a sacred grove with acoustics only the gods can measure. Not too showy, he insists, as Dionysus drapes garlands over everything. Historians still argue whether the first music festival was truly divine in origin or just a mortal imitation of the gods' chaotic rehearsal. But this much is clear. Something is coming. Something loud, lovely, and completely unprecedented. And it all began because one very shiny god got bored on a Tuesday. Preparations begin in earnest. You trail Apollo as he descends from Olympus toward the mortal world, his every step leaving behind a shimmer of light, like dew that sparkles before the sun rises. He's humming again, half melody, half manifestation. You can't tell if he's composing or simply keeping his nerves in check. He lands, finally, on the slopes of Mount Parnassus. A soft breeze curls around him, as if the mountain itself recognizes its most musical visitor. The nearby city of Delphi, already home to his famed oracle, sits nestled in the rocks below, unaware that it's about to become the accidental birthplace of the first music festival. Apollo squints at the terrain. Decent acoustics, good elevation, room for dancing satyrs and mildly chaotic worship. He surveys the empty slope and adds, "We'll need snacks." The muses arrive next, gliding in like a synchronized team of overly poetic weather patterns. Each one carries an instrument or a prop, scrolls, harps, cymbals, oddly shaped gourds. Terpsichore brings a whole choreography written in the clouds. Calliope looks around. "We're going to need a stage." "Right," Apollo murmurs. He waves a hand, and from the rocky soil rises a curved marble dais. Natural-looking, elegant, and not too different from the ancient Greek orchestra spaces we'd recognize from amphitheaters. Historically, those semicircular performance spaces were often built into hillsides, making this whole situation strangely plausible. Except for the talking goat helping lay down reeds for seating. Pan is here, of course. No one invited him again, but he brought artisanal cheese, so no one objects too much. As the sun begins to lower, the gods and muses begin sound check. Birds pause mid-flight. Trees lean in ever so slightly. Shepherds and travelers on distant roads stop, blink, and look toward the horizon, puzzled by the melodies rising from the hills. Some begin walking toward the sound. They don't know why. Neither do you, really. But you can feel it. This is turning into something larger. Meanwhile, Apollo is conducting rehearsals with all the restraint of a caffeine-deprived band teacher on performance day. Hermes insists on improvising every solo. Dionysus keeps changing keys mid-song because the grapes told me to. Artemis only plays when no one's watching. Ares demands a fog machine, which no one really understands, but he makes threatening gestures until Hephaestus whips one up using a boiling spring and some enchanted charcoal. Still, something's taking shape. They run through a piece that begins with a soft lyre intro, builds with Dionysus barrel drums, and crescendos into a layered chant sung by the muses. It's haunting and ancient. You find yourself leaning forward, not because you're not sleepy, but because it's just that oddly beautiful. Fun fact, in historical Greek practice, music wasn't divided from poetry or dance. It was one unified art. Even epic poems like the Iliad would have been performed with musical accompaniment. Scholars believe this integration helped preserve the oral tradition for generations. Imagine Homer with a backup beat. The rehearsal is interrupted by a courier nymph, panting. She holds a scroll. "Message from Hades," she gasps. Apollo unfurls it. "If this isn't over by sunset, I'm canceling my appearance. Below that, also, someone owes me 3 drachmas for harp rental. Oh, good, Apollo mutters. He's in a mood. Isn't he always? Hermes grins, tuning his lyre to match the tension in the air. As twilight paints the sky in pastel fire, the first mortal spectators begin arriving. Farmers, potters, shepherds, scholars, and a suspiciously enthusiastic chicken vendor. They don't know what to expect. There's no ticket booth, no program. Just the faint promise of music carried on divine wind. The muses flutter about, handing out flower crowns and mild existential poetry. Dionysus opens a makeshift wine stand. It's unclear whether he's charging or just offering a donation-based chalice system. You, meanwhile, drift above the crowd, watching as mortals settle into grassy seats, heads tilted upward, eyes wide with that mixture of confusion and wonder only found at music festivals and accidental seances. Historians still debate what happened that night. Some say it was merely myth, a story told to explain the cultural importance of festivals like the Pythian Games, which featured music and poetry contests alongside athletic events. Others claim there really was a golden age when gods and mortals shared the same rhythms, if only briefly. But here's what you see. Apollo steps into the soft light. His lyre gleams, not in a showy way, but like something both ancient and alive. He looks at the crowd, divine and mortal alike, clears his throat. This one, he says, is about chasing the sun until it runs out of sky. And with that, he begins. The music unfolds like silk in the wind. Pan's reed pipes fill in the spaces between Muses' harmonies. Artemis's moonlit flute slips between drum beats like a silver thread. Even Ares, to everyone's surprise, keeps a solid rhythm. Mortals watch, stunned. Some begin swaying. Others close their eyes, overwhelmed. A baby in the front row coos in perfect time. A philosopher scribbles furiously, trying to name the unnameable. You sit back, letting the sound wash over you like warm rain. Apollo smiles as he plays, not the tight, anxious smile from Olympus, but a real one. For once, he isn't trying to impress. He's just sharing. This isn't perfection. It's better. It's music. You sit cross-legged on the air itself, suspended above the hillside as the twilight performance rolls gently forward. There's a sense of stillness now, like even the crickets are too reverent to chirp. Mortals and immortals alike are caught in the web of sound, some tapping their feet, some weeping silently, and at least one philosopher in the back muttering, "I was not emotionally prepared for this." Apollo's fingers dance across the strings of his lyre like they were born to do it, which, to be fair, they kind of were. Each note seems to stretch across time itself, weaving together past and future like golden thread through velvet. And here comes your historical anchor. The Greeks didn't just see music as entertainment. To them, it was mathematics made audible. Pythagoras, the triangle guy, believed that music was tied to the harmony of the spheres, an audible echo of cosmic order. The distances between planets, he claimed, created a kind of divine music too perfect for mortal ears. So, in a way, what you're hearing now isn't just a festival. It's a mathematical proof rendered in melody. But of course, this is Olympus adjacent, and that means drama is never far away. Somewhere to the left of the stage, Dionysus spills an entire amphora of wine onto a sleeping satyr. The satyr doesn't wake, but starts snoring in perfect rhythm, which oddly adds a nice bass line. Hestia, maintaining the refreshment table, glares at anyone who dares double-dip a fig. Meanwhile, Hermes is performing a spontaneous spoken-word solo with questionable rhymes and a suspiciously modern cadence. You think you're mortal, but you vibe eternal. When the gods drop beats, it's infernal but maternal. Apollo stops playing briefly just to stare at him. You just rhymed eternal with maternal. I know, Hermes says smugly. It's called innovation. Despite himself, Apollo smiles. There's something almost sacred in the disarray. You can tell this isn't how he envisioned the evening. Not polished, not perfect, but it's real. And, strangely, it's fun. Which brings us to another fringe fact. Ancient Greek festivals were often wild combinations of chaos and ceremony. The Panathenaic festival, for instance, mixed solemn processions with athletic contests, musical competitions, and, yes, even public dancing that sometimes got a little too enthusiastic. Think of it as part Olympic Games, part Coachella, part slightly tipsy philosophy club. Back on the hillside, mortals are joining in. Not with instruments, though one ambitious child did bring a handmade drum made of goat skin and hubris, but by singing. The melody is unfamiliar, but the rhythm is instinctual. And, as their voices rise, Apollo lets the gods' instruments soften. The crowd takes over. It's a rough chorus, but beautiful in its roughness, like pottery fresh from the kiln, still bearing the fingerprints of its maker. This, Apollo whispers to you, is what I wanted. Not adoration, not applause, just connection. But of course, not all gods are team players. There's a sudden chill in the air, a subtle shift in the wind, and then Hades arrives. He does not enter. He appears, draped in deep shadows and the kind of dignity that makes everyone else feel like they've overdressed and underachieved. His chariot stands just outside the grove, pulled by spectral horses and followed by a swarm of mildly anxious crows. He does not look amused. I was told this would be over by sunset, he intones. It is now well past moonrise. Dionysus waves. Want a drink? I want quiet. Apollo, ever the diplomat, approaches with his lyre cradled carefully. Lord of the underworld, thank you for gracing us. We're just wrapping up. Hades arches one eternal eyebrow. Are you? It's not a question. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. Some versions of myth suggest that Hades, despite his grim domain, actually had a deep appreciation for order and, believe it or not, music. Certain Orphic hymns portray him not just as a brooding deity, but as a ruler of balance and hidden beauty, a god of the secret rhythms beneath life. So when Apollo gestures to the mortal crowd and says, "They're singing with us," Hades pauses, listens, and then he does something unexpected. He steps forward. The crowd parts instinctively. No one dares breathe. He raises one hand and snaps. From beneath his cloak, a faint melody rises. Deep, resonant, ancient. It's a minor key, the sound of shadows under olive trees, of forgotten names and silent promises. The kind of music you don't dance to, but you carry with you forever. He nods once. Continue. Just like that, the mood shifts. The gods resume, this time blending Apollo's bright chords with Hades' dark undertones. The music deepens, grows layered, not just joyful, but meaningful, a harmony of opposites. And that's what the Greeks truly believed harmony was. Not sameness, but balance. Not perfection, but contrast resolved. You glance at Apollo. He looks proud. Not because he controlled everything, but because he let it breathe. You, eternal bystander and professional sleep shuffler, lean back and let it wash over you again. If the first few notes were an invitation, this is the reply. And if this is the first music festival, divine or otherwise, it's setting a pretty impossible standard. Now that Hades has reluctantly joined the jam session, things begin to evolve in strange, slightly haunting ways. You watch as the crowd absorbs the new tone. Deeper, slower, like twilight settling over water. Some mortals lean in closer, their faces lit not by torches, but by the sheer gravity of the sound. Others sway in place, lulled into something like a trance. Even the rowdy satyrs, normally one goat step away from chaos, sit still for a moment. Apollo doesn't even flinch. He adjusts the strings on his lyre, plays a counter melody, bright, hopeful, like stars breaking through a storm cloud. It complements Hades's minor key perfectly. You're now witnessing a live debate between sun and shadow, but in music. Historically speaking, this wouldn't surprise the ancient Greeks. They saw music as a literal force of the universe, able to calm or incite, to guide the soul and align the cosmos. Plato wrote that different musical modes could influence a person's character. The Phrygian, mode, good for courage. The Dorian, noble restraint. And the Lydian, well, a little weepy, but emotionally rich. What's happening here is some uncharted celestial mode that would probably make Plato spill his wine. The muses adjust accordingly. Calliope begins to narrate softly over the harmonies, verses about the river Lethe and golden chariots, about young gods stumbling into greatness and old gods remembering how it felt to be new. Dionysus, wine-drunk, flower-crowned, and barefoot, launches into an interpretive dance that's part ballet, part tumble, part— I may have tripped over my own foot, but let's pretend it was intentional. A few mortals giggle, loosening the reverent hush just enough to feel human again. And that's where the next surprise begins. You feel the rumble before you see it. A soft vibration through the soil, like a massive drum being tapped far underground. Mortals glance nervously at the ground. The gods freeze mid-note. Even Hermes stops mid-verse, which is saying something. Then, bursting through the trees like a living thunderclap, arrives a giant centaur. Well, technically a double centaur, riding another centaur piggyback, which no one really understands and no one wants to ask about. He skids to a halt, breathless, sweaty, covered in olive leaves. "Sorry I'm late," he pants. "Got lost near Thessaly. Also, there were, bees." A beat of silence. Then Dionysus roars with laughter. "You made it, Creon. We saved you a seat." He gestures to a flat rock currently occupied by a tortoise. The tortoise gives a slow blink, unimpressed. Creon bows, then, still wheezing, pulls out an enormous horn-like instrument. It looks like it was forged by a blacksmith who got bored halfway through and let a goat finish it. But when Creon plays, the sound is astonishing. Deep, mournful, echoing through the hills with the power of 1,000 missed goodbyes. The horn fills in the space beneath Hades's melodies and Apollo's bright strumming, making the music suddenly feel three-dimensional. You didn't know sound could do that. And here's your quirky tidbit. There are theories that ancient Greek festivals included oddball instruments we no longer recognize. Things like the sambuca. No, not the drink. The scabellum. Basically, ancient clappers strapped to shoes, and even noisemakers used in cult rituals to create trance-like atmospheres. So Creon's horn isn't as outlandish as it looks. It's just ahead of its time. More mortals arrive now. Word has spread. Some heard the music from mountaintops. Others claim they dreamed it. One man swears his donkey started humming. Whatever the method, they're here, and the hillside is beginning to fill. Apollo glances at you. "I think we need more space." With a flick of his hand and a whisper to the stars, he expands the hill, not just outward, but slightly upward, like a natural amphitheater blooming into place. Trees gently move aside. The moon angles herself like a spotlight. It's not loud, it's just vast. Which is oddly how you feel, sitting among gods and mortals, shadows and stars, like you've been gently widened. Like there's more space inside you than there was an hour ago. Historians still argue whether festivals like this were ever more than myth. But you're beginning to wonder if myth was never about truth or falsehood, just a more poetic way of remembering. Remembering what it felt like to sit among strangers who sang the same notes. To watch a god smile, not because he must, but because he can. To listen. Just listen. As the music swells again, you lean back against the breeze and let your eyes drift slightly shut. The vibrations carry you, not forward, but downward, rooted, settled, like a pebble finally finding its place in a stream bed. The muses circle the stage, their movements more fluid now. Less choreography, more instinct. One of them, Cleo, you think, glances your way with a smirk as if to say, "Yeah, this is going in the archives." The final chord of this round trembles in the air, and in the pause that follows, no one speaks. Even the wind holds its breath. Then, softly, a small child claps. The sound is like a pebble skipping across still water. And then everyone joins, not raucously, not loudly, just enough. Apollo bows, sweat on his brow and stardust on his tunic, and for the first time in eons he looks satisfied, not triumphant, not divine, just enough. It's getting late now, well, Olympus late, which means the moon is high, the stars are showing off, and the air has that cool post-performance hum, like the world itself is slowly exhaling. You're still on that hillside, tucked between mortals who've long since stopped worrying about decorum and gods who have finally, miraculously, stopped trying to one-up each other. Mostly. Someone's passed around a platter of honeyed figs, and a satyr next to you offers one without making eye contact, which in this setting is practically a declaration of affection. Apollo is off to the side, tuning his lyre. Not for another performance, but like a nervous habit. You get the sense he's thinking, not about what just happened, but about what might come next. Because, as it turns out, when you accidentally invent a music festival, there are consequences, even divine ones. First up, someone's got to clean up. And since no Olympian wants to be the first to leave, classic power move, they're all lingering in that awkward post-party lull. You know the vibe. Half the crowd wants to go home and soak their hooves. The other half just discovered a fresh amphora of pomegranate wine. So, while gods pretend to be casual and mortals try not to fall asleep upright, the muses begin to gently herd people into loose clusters. There's no formal announcement, but suddenly everyone is humming again. Just a single note. Then another. It spreads slowly, like fog curling through olive trees. This isn't a performance now, it's more like a ritual, a lullaby offered to the sky itself. And here's your history anchor. In many ancient Greek festivals, music wasn't just celebratory, it was sacred. Hymns, called paeans, were used to honor Apollo himself, sung at sunrise, battlefields, and banquets alike. But scholars still argue whether these were rigidly composed or partly improvised in the moment, shaped by the mood of the crowd or the whim of the god. What's happening now? Definitely the latter. The muses begin to chant, not in Greek exactly, but something older, more elemental. It's not about the words, it's about the tone. You feel it settle into your ribs like warm broth. One muse taps gently on a shallow drum with her fingertips, like rain on roof tiles. Dionysus, swaying beside a laurel bush he insists is his new best friend, lifts a small reed pipe and tries to harmonize. He fails, but charmingly. Hermes starts beatboxing. He fails harder. Apollo sighs and raises one elegant eyebrow. Do you have to? Do you have to be so uptight? Hermes fires back, spinning his caduceus like a cheer baton. This is a festival, not a symposium. Rhythm is not your strong suit. And yours is? Hermes grins. Son boy, you've got one tempo. Dramatic. Apollo raises his lyre, ready with a rebuttal, in song. You brace for another musical duel, possibly involving divine light beams, but instead, he strums a simple three-note chord. Warm, patient. Hermes blinks, then shrugs, grins, and joins in with a soft whistle. And that's when you realize this wasn't just the birth of a music event. It was the invention of something bigger, of call and response, of collaboration, of ensemble. A truly Greek concept. After all, even in their tragedies, it was the chorus that held the emotional thread. The group, not the soloist, carried the moral center. You glance around. No one is watching anymore. They're listening. Not just to the gods, but to each other. Mortals echoing gods. Gods echoing mortals. Even Hades is nodding slowly, his fingers tapping against his obsidian belt buckle in a rhythm that, surprisingly, syncs with the goat drummer near the fig table. A gentle breeze curls around your ankles. Someone's fallen asleep against a cypress tree, their head tilted just so, mouth slightly open in a way that suggests dreams involving sheep and cinnamon. Meanwhile, the stars above seem to pulse with quiet rhythm, almost like they're watching, or maybe listening too. Now comes your fringe tidbit. There's a theory that Greek musical gatherings were aligned with celestial events, solstices, equinoxes, or rare planetary alignments. Some believe that festival timings weren't arbitrary but cosmically significant, meant to sync mortals with divine rhythms. So maybe tonight, beneath this pulsing starlight and olive-scented breeze, the timing is just right. Apollo shifts his stance. He looks out over the crowd, gods half drunk and barefoot, mortals wrapped in shawls or dreams, muses swaying with eyes half closed, and smiles that rare kind of smile. The one that says, I didn't plan this, but I think I love it. He doesn't speak. He just strums. Once, twice, then lets the lyre fall silent against his chest. The music ends not with a crescendo, but with a sigh, a musical exhale. And in that moment, every sound, every whisper, snore, distant owl, feels perfectly placed. The silence becomes part of the concert. One last historical detail to file away before you drift too far. Some ancient inscriptions suggest that the final song at sacred gatherings was meant to signal safe passage into sleep, or, symbolically, the underworld. It was music as a bridge. So maybe what Apollo just played wasn't an ending at all. Maybe it was an invitation. You lean back, your limbs loose, your eyes a little too heavy to keep open. You feel it again, that widening, that warmth, that soft, sneaky joy of having witnessed something unrepeatable. And as the music fades into silence, and the silence fades into night, you finally let yourself tip sideways into sleep. You'll remember none of this tomorrow, and yet, all of it. The stars hang low now, so low you could almost pluck one like a ripe fig if you reached high enough. But you don't. You stay grounded, curled in that patch of soft grass, listening to the residual hum of a divine jam session that's finally dissolved into whispers, snores, and the occasional hiccup from Dionysus, who has made a pillow out of a small amphora and a napping satyr. Apollo sits apart on a smooth stone that glows faintly in the starlight. He's still. Not brooding, exactly, but reflective. His lyre rests in his lap, untouched. You get the sense that even gods need to absorb things sometimes. From across the clearing, Hermes tiptoes over, cradling something awkwardly shaped in his arms. It's a lost lamb. Where did he get a lamb? He doesn't explain. He just gently deposits it next to a mortal child who'd fallen asleep curled around a pair of sandals. The lamb settles in, as if it too had been invited. Now, here's your historical fun fact of the evening. Many Greek festivals, especially those in honor of Dionysus or Apollo, included animal processions. But the animals weren't always sacrificed. Some were honored guests, washed, perfumed, even crowned with flowers. The idea was that all living beings, not just humans, had a role in celebrating the sacred rhythms of the world. Tonight, that concept has clearly gone rogue. Because at the edge of the grove, 3 turtles are slowly making their way toward the fire. One is wearing a tiny wreath. Another is dragging a grape. No one stops them. Honestly, they might be the most punctual guests yet. And now the wind picks up just a little. Cool, eucalyptus-laced, making the torches flicker and the lyres hum ever so slightly in their stands. It's the kind of breeze that signals a shift in the night. Not the end, but a soft turning of the page. A mortal woman with silver-streaked hair sits upright and begins to hum something low and wordless. It's not particularly melodic. More like remembering a melody that's just out of reach. A few others join in instinctively. Then, surprisingly, Hades does too. Not with words, but with a soft hum that vibrates in the chest more than the ears. It's not mournful, it's grounding. You feel yourself settle deeper into the grass. A satyr adds a soft rhythm by tapping his hooves on a hollow log, and a dryad beside him braids a vine into his beard while nodding to the beat. They don't speak. They just let the music unfold. And that's your scholarly debate moment. Experts still argue whether the concept of autoschediasma, that is, spontaneous, collective music-making, was ever truly part of classical Greek culture, or simply a romanticized idea projected backward from modern notions of folk improvisation. But tonight, you're watching it happen. No scripts, no chorus lines, no epics, just music made from the now. And it's oddly beautiful. Across the fire, one of the muses, Melpomene, who usually handles tragedy and big, dramatic curtain pulls, quietly weaves a crown of poppies for the half-asleep Creon, the double centaur. Creon snorts in his sleep, dreams of racing dolphins and murmurs, "Tell them, the bees weren't real." You smile, and that's when you notice something curious. Above the clearing, the stars seem closer, brighter. Not in an ominous, "uh-oh, Zeus is watching" kind of way, but in the way candlelight feels when you lean toward it. Familiar, gentle, curious. You squint and realize the stars are shifting, not randomly, but into patterns. In ancient times, the Greeks believed the constellations were stories written across the sky. Cassiopeia, Orion, Andromeda, all frozen in mythic poses. But some myths suggest that new stories could be added, that if a moment was pure enough, profound enough, the gods might carve it into the heavens. Tonight they do. A soft line of stars now resembles a lyre, another a wine jug, and, though you might be sleep-drunk at this point, you could swear there's a turtle constellation with a tiny grape on its back. You wonder if future mortals will see those stars and make up stories about them. They won't know about tonight, of course, not exactly. They'll call it a legend, a myth, maybe a metaphor, but you'll know better. The fire dims, not because it's dying, but because it's time. The muses, now standing, begin to hum something slow and deep, the kind of song that makes your spine remember your grandmother's lullabies, even if she never sang them. Apollo rises. He walks silently to the center of the clearing. No words, just the hush that follows someone who's no longer performing, but becoming something quieter. He lifts his lyre, strums once, then, instead of playing, he removes a single string, hands it to Hermes, then sits. You blink, because it's not symbolic, it's logistical. They're done. No encore, no divine curtain call, just done. That single string, you sense, will become something else. A thread in a story, a charm around someone's wrist, a line in a future song that no one remembers learning. You lie back again, the grass cool against your skin, the sound of sleepy breathing all around. Above you, the new constellation pulses once, gently. And for the first time tonight, you don't feel like a guest. You feel like part of the music. The first light of dawn creeps through olive branches, casting soft pink and gold patches on the earth beneath you. You wake, not quite sure when sleep took hold, but with a lingering sense of calm, like the quiet after a storm or the hush in a library just before it opens. Around you, the clearing is nearly empty. Most mortals have gone home, wrapped in cloaks and dreams. But the gods, they linger. Apollo is still seated on that glowing stone, his lyre now missing its single string. It looks oddly incomplete, like a puzzle missing a piece. He plucks the remaining strings thoughtfully. The music is simple, more a melody for waking than celebration. You recall that in ancient Greece, music played a significant role in daily rituals, including waking up and going to sleep. Songs known as paeans honored Apollo not only as the god of music, but also of healing and prophecy. Some scholars still debate how much these songs were meant to soothe the sick versus inspire warriors, but one thing's clear: music was medicine. As you listen, your mind drifts to the strange and delightful fact that Apollo was also sometimes depicted with a bow and arrows, symbols of plague as well as healing. Duality wrapped up in a perfect haired package. Nearby, Hermes approaches, still holding the single string from the lyre. He looks at Apollo and says nothing, but his smirk suggests some joke is bubbling just beneath the surface. Instead, he kneels and ties the string around his wrist like a bracelet. "This will keep me in tune," he says with a wink. Apollo chuckles, a sound like warm sunlight slipping through leaves. You feel a bit like you're eavesdropping on a cosmic inside joke. A few other gods begin to stir. Demeter appears, brushing soil from her hands, carrying a basket of wild herbs. She sits beside you quietly and offers a sprig of lavender. Lavender was prized in ancient Mediterranean cultures, not just for its fragrance but for its calming properties. People believed it could help ease insomnia and nightmares. Historians still argue whether lavender was ever used medicinally in ancient Greece, or if it became popular only in later Roman and medieval times. But either way, the symbolism fits perfectly here. You inhale the soft scent. It's grounding. More gentle hums rise as the muses gather to sing a song without words, a quiet hymn to new beginnings and old friendships. Apollo stands and stretches, a casual gesture that somehow seems regal. He gazes toward the horizon. "Tomorrow," he says softly, "we will do this again." You blink, because in your head you're already imagining the next festival, the next accidental invention. A smile tugs at your lips. As the sun climbs higher, you realize you've traveled not just through a night of music and myth, but through an experience that feels both ancient and alive. It was never about perfection or spectacle. It was about presence. And maybe, just maybe, about the way even gods need to forget their responsibilities for a while and simply listen. The morning settles in like a soft blanket, warm and comforting, with birdsong weaving through the olive branches. You sit up, brushing off the dew, feeling the world shift from the stillness of night to the promise of day. Around you, traces of the festival remain: a few scattered petals, a half-empty amphora of wine, the lingering scent of roasted chestnuts. The gods have begun their rituals for the new day, but something about the air feels different, more relaxed, less Olympian posturing, more communal sigh. You overhear Hera chatting with Athena about a game of strategy they'll play later, something involving olives and painted stones. And that's when you notice a group of mortals gathered by a nearby spring, murmuring about the music that lingers in their bones. This morning, you're struck by the idea that the music festival didn't just end last night. It transformed. It seeped into the daily life of those who were there. You remember reading that in many ancient cultures, including the Greeks, festivals weren't isolated events but ongoing processes that shaped community rhythms, from planting to harvesting, from storytelling to healing. Historians debate how formalized these transitions were, but there's no doubt the people involved carried a spark from the festival into everyday moments. Back at the fire pit, a satyr hums a tune you don't recognize, tapping out rhythms with small stones. He looks at you and grins, his eyes sparkling with mischief. You feel it too, don't you? The echo. You nod, unsure how to explain that you do. And then a surprising guest arrives, Pan, god of the wild and shepherds, bounding in with a breathless laugh. He's carrying a small wooden flute, which he immediately begins to play softly. His music is raw and natural, with all the imperfections and joys of a dawn chorus. The goats nearby perk up, heads bobbing in time. Pan's arrival adds a new texture to the festival's legacy: the wildness beneath the order, the spontaneity beneath the structure. It reminds you of a quirky fact. In some local myths, Pan's flute was said to cause panic, a sudden rush of fear. But tonight, it's a sound of comfort. Historians still argue whether the panic attributed to Pan was literal or metaphorical, but here and now it feels like a gift. As the gods mingle with mortals, stories begin to flow. Tales of past festivals, forgotten songs, and dreams yet to be sung. You realize that this accidental music festival isn't just an event. It's a living thread weaving together gods, humans, myths, and moments. You lean back against a warm stone, the sun casting gentle light over the scene. Your eyelids grow heavy again, but this time it's a contented kind of tired. A tired filled with music, laughter, and the strange, beautiful feeling of having been part of something timeless. The day rolls on slowly, like honey dripping from a comb, thick, golden, and impossibly sweet. You wander through the village that has sprung up near the festival site, where merchants arrange their wares and children chase one another around ancient stone pillars. The aroma of fresh bread mingles with wild herbs, and the distant sound of a lyre floats through the air, played by an unseen hand. It's the kind of afternoon that invites you to slow down, breathe deeper, and maybe consider that ancient Greeks knew a thing or two about the art of leisure. One thing you notice is the curious role music plays here. Not just entertainment, but a companion to daily tasks. Farmers sing while they thresh wheat, potters hum while shaping clay, and women whistle melodies while weaving. This blending of work and music is something historians are still trying to fully understand. But there's growing evidence that sound was believed to influence everything from crop growth to social harmony. You pass a group of elders seated beneath a fig tree, sharing stories with a patience that feels eternal. One of them, a wiry old man with twinkling eyes, tells a tale about a mythical creature called the Corybantes, wild, armored dancers who supposedly guarded the secrets of the gods through rhythmic movement. You listen closely as he describes their clashing bronze weapons and stomping feet that were said to scare away evil spirits and bring fertility to the land. The story sounds more like a fever dream than history, but then again, who's to say where myth ends and ritual begins? The Corybantes remain a mystery. Historians still argue whether they were real cult members or symbolic figures created to explain ancient dance rites. Nearby, a group of children play a game involving a small harp and singing challenges, their laughter bright and pure. You smile, watching how these moments seem like echoes of that first accidental festival. Music and myth intertwining naturally in everyday life. As the sun tilts westward, you find yourself drawn to a quiet garden where a woman tends fragrant herbs and colorful flowers. She's none other than Hygeia, goddess of health, who hums softly as she works, blending plants known to soothe the body and mind. Lavender, chamomile, and mint, all used in ancient remedies for insomnia and stress. You inhale deeply, feeling the gentle promise of rest. She nods at you, her smile serene. Music heals, she says simply. And somehow, in this tranquil garden, surrounded by the soft buzz of bees and the distant melody of a flute, you believe her. As twilight approaches, the sky begins to blush a soft lavender, and the air cools just enough to coax you into a slow, reflective pace. You find yourself back at the clearing, where the flicker of torches rekindles the warmth you felt earlier. Tonight, the atmosphere is gentler, as if the festival itself is easing toward a peaceful conclusion. You watch as Apollo, now fully restored to his radiant self, tunes his lyre with a delicate touch. The music that follows is not grand or boisterous. It's intimate, a lullaby woven from the threads of the day's moments. A few mortals gather close, their eyes half closed, bodies relaxing into the earth. Among them is a young poet, scribbling faintly in a scroll, capturing lines inspired by the festival's accidental magic. You remember that poetry and music were closely intertwined in ancient Greece. Think of the lyric poets who composed verses meant to be sung with accompaniment. But there's a quirky detail. Some ancient Greek songs were performed with such slow tempos and gentle repetition that they functioned almost like hypnotic chants. Historians still debate whether these were intended for meditation, healing, or simply to aid sleep, but tonight's melody feels like all three. Nearby, a dryad gently sways to the rhythm, her leafy hair shimmering in the torchlight. She hums a tune passed down through generations of forest spirits, a song said to calm restless animals and soothe aching limbs. The blending of divine music and natural sound creates an atmosphere so serene you feel your eyelids fluttering like delicate wings. In this moment, even the usual chatter of the night creatures seems to soften, as if they're tuning in. You spot a satyr dozing against a tree trunk, his flute tucked beside him. His soft snore is rhythmic, almost part of the nocturnal symphony. Apollo's music drifts through the clearing like a warm breeze, carrying stories of ancient gods and mortals who, like you, sought comfort in sound. A gentle scholarly debate lingers in your mind. Did the ancient Greeks purposefully design music to affect the mind's rhythms, or was it a happy accident born of artistic expression? Perhaps it doesn't matter. Tonight, it simply is, and as the melody fades, replaced by the steady hum of night, you feel yourself dissolving into the calm. Night deepens around you, velvet dark and dotted with the slow blink of distant stars. The festival's final act is underway, a quiet procession moving through the olive grove. You join in, stepping lightly on the soft earth, guided by the faint glow of fireflies that dance like tiny lanterns in the cool air. The procession is simple, almost like a ritual of farewell. At its center, a wreath of fresh flowers and laurel leaves is carried by a young priestess, her face serene beneath a crown of blossoms. You recall that the laurel wreath was sacred to Apollo, symbolizing victory, purity, and eternal life. It's a detail well known, yet seeing it here, in this gentle nocturnal moment, feels deeply moving. The group walks slowly, humming a soft chant that weaves through the trees, blending human voices with the night's ambient sounds. The melody is neither rushed nor ornate, just a soothing drone that settles comfortably over your skin like a favorite blanket. Some scholars argue that such processions were designed as rites of passage or transitions between seasons, states of mind, or even life and death. Others believe they served purely social functions, strengthening community bonds. Either way, there's an undeniable magic in the shared rhythm, the collective breath held in time. Suddenly, the procession pauses at a small shrine adorned with offerings, honey, figs, and a few scattered coins. You sense the reverence in the air, the hush as participants silently make wishes or prayers. You quietly place your hand on the cool stone, feeling a ripple of connection, not just to the gods, but to every person who has ever stood here before you. Nearby, a small fire crackles, its amber glow reflecting in the eyes of a child who watches with wide curiosity. You wonder what stories this child will carry forward, what myths they will retell. And then the priestess releases the wreath into the gentle stream running nearby, the water carrying it softly downstream like a whispered blessing. It's a final gesture, simple yet profound, a reminder that festivals, music, and myth are part of an ongoing flow, never static, always evolving. You feel your own breath slow, your heart sinking with the gentle pulse of the night. The accidental music festival that began with a broken string and a stray tune has become something much larger, a quiet celebration of life's rhythms, ancient and present. You let your eyes close, the murmurs fading into a comforting hush. The grove is nearly silent now, save for the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant call of an owl. You settle on a mossy stone, feeling the coolness seep gently into your skin. Your mind drifts back over the festival's moments, the music, the laughter, the unexpected friendships between gods and mortals. You think about the many layers of meaning wrapped up in those simple notes played by Apollo and Hermes. There's something soothing in the idea that even divine beings can stumble into joy and invention. It reminds you that creativity often springs from accident and play, not just grand design. You recall a quirky bit of trivia. In some versions of the myth, Hermes crafted the lyre not to impress Apollo, but simply to charm his mother, Maia. It was a casual act of love, turned into a powerful symbol. You smile, imagining Hermes sneaking around with his half-finished instrument, blissfully unaware he was setting the stage for the world's first music festival. The night deepens, and you notice the stars seem to twinkle a bit brighter, as if applauding this unexpected harmony. Historians continue to debate how much the ancient Greeks saw festivals as sacred versus social. But perhaps it's not an either-or. Maybe it's the blend, the weaving of reverence and revelry, that creates the magic. As you breathe in the cool night air, you feel a gentle calm washing over you. Your thoughts slow. The festival's melody hums quietly in your memory. You realize that the story of Apollo's accidental music festival is not just a tale from the past. It's an invitation to find beauty in mistakes, music in silence, and connection in shared moments. The forest around you seems to lean in, listening. You let yourself be carried by the rhythm, soft and steady. The first pale light of morning peeks over the horizon, casting a soft glow on the grove where you have spent the night. Everything feels hushed, as if the world is holding its breath before fully waking. You stretch slowly, savoring the lingering peace and the delicate threads of music still woven through the air. The festival's echoes feel like a gentle pulse beneath your skin. As you rise, you notice a small, smooth stone resting near your foot. It wasn't there before. You pick it up and feel its cool weight, a quiet reminder of the night's journey. Maybe it's a token left by the gods, or just a gift from the earth. Either way, it feels like a promise that music, myth, and the magic of shared stories will always find a way to return. You walk slowly toward the path leading away from the grove, the scent of olive blossoms and wild herbs guiding you forward. Behind you, the trees stand tall and silent, witnesses to a festival born of accident and wonder. You think of the many lives touched by that first melody, the gods who played, the mortals who listened, and the stories that continue to drift through time like soft songs carried on the breeze. And as you step into the morning light, you carry with you a newfound calm, a whisper of that ancient music, and the quiet joy of having been part of something timeless. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together.